Right, hello historians. Thank you for tuning in to the first video in our FRQ review series. I know a lot of you have been preparing for our standardized test later this year, so as I mentioned in class, the purpose of these videos is to kind of show you how answering an FRQ works before you actually get to the test and try it out on your own. So in this video, the first one that we're doing, we're going to be reviewing the SAQ, the short answer question. It is the first and the shortest FRQ that you will see when you crack open your test. And while they are pretty short, not a whole lot of points, we got to remember that every point counts. And in order to get the highest score we can possibly get, we need to make sure we know exactly how we're going to answer every single type of question that we could come across. So the SAQ. Remember from class, our chief strategy here is the ACE strategy, which stands for answer the question, cite your explanation, or cite your evidence, and explain how the two are linked. How does the evidence support your answer? So using this framework, we're going to take a look at these two different statements here, the one from John Adams and from Benjamin Rush. Both of them contemporaries with each other. The statements made at different times, but both of them about kind of the same thing, about the American Revolution. We know from reading our questions that we are going to describe one significant difference between Adams and Rush's understanding of the American Revolution. From reading 3B, we are then going to explain how one specific historical event or development could be used to support Adams' interpretation, and the same thing, but in reverse, how one specific historical event or development could be used to support Rush's interpretation. Now, I want everyone to take a second, pause the video, and read through these two different statements made by these two different men and see if you can pick out, now that we've gone over the questions a little bit, how their understanding of the American Revolution has differed. Go ahead, pause your video, take a good couple minutes to read both, not too long, and start it back up. We'll continue from there. Historians, now that you have read these two different documents, you should have a pretty good idea of how they differ. Now, both men clearly have very strong opinions about when the revolution actually happened. John Adams says that, what do we mean by the revolution? The war? That was no part of the revolution, only an effect and a consequence of it. The revolution was in the minds of the people. And this was effected from 1760 to 1775. Before a drop of blood was shed at Lexington. Now, meanwhile, Benjamin Rush believes that the American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution. On the contrary, nothing but the first act of the great drama is closed. It remains yet to establish and perfect our new forms of government and to prepare the principles, morals, and manners of our citizens. Now, these two men clearly believe in different definitions of the revolution and have different ideas of when the revolution actually took place. So, to answer 3A, we could say, for example, that Adams believes that the revolution began way back in 1760, whereas, and here's how we link these two things together. Benjamin Rush believes that it goes after, it is the establishment of the new political kind of structure. So he believes that the revolution comes after. Now, I hope you can see how we can cite specific textual evidence. For 3A, we could say that John Adams believes that the revolution began in 1760, as shown when he says that the revolution is only an effect and a consequence of the war, and that revolution was in the minds of the people from 1760 to 1775, specifically citing that evidence and using it to show how Adams believed that the revolution began way back in 1760. Whereas Rush believes that though the American War is over, it is only the first act in the great drama of the American Revolution. So we can use his specific statement to show how he feels about when the revolution takes place. Now moving on to 3B and 3C. These are kind of similar, but what you're going to have to do here is draw on your own historical knowledge. So this is going to be a lot of using your context, what is happening around these events that are being outlined. So I want everyone to take a second, brainstorm some possible events, documents, happenings that you know of that fall around just before the revolution that could kind of support Adams' interpretation of the revolution as beginning in 1760. And the same thing for Benjamin Rush's interpretation of revolution, which begins after the American War ends. Go ahead and take a second, brainstorm a couple things. We'll come back and I'll share my examples with you. Historians, welcome back. I hope you have a few different examples that you feel you can use. Now remember, you're only going to use one specific historical event or development. Try to make sure when you're answering your SAQs, you are following the directions to the letter. If it asks you for one piece of evidence, don't provide two. Certainly don't provide three. Make sure that you're doing exactly what it is asking you to do for your maximum points potential. But in thinking about a few different historical events, I think I'm going to go with the Boston Tea Party. We all know it, a lot of fun, a good act of petty rebellion and vandalism. Everyone loves the Boston Tea Party. So what we could say for 3B is maybe something along the lines of former President John Adams' concept of revolution occurring in the minds of the people from 1760 to 1775 is evidenced by the events of the Boston Tea Party, in which a group of colonial citizens boarded a British ship and dumped a bunch of tea in the harbor. Don't have to get into any more detail than that, and just use that to show how your evidence supports your claim. Or rather, in this case, John Adams' claim, his answer, his belief that the revolution began way before the actual war. Following up with 3C, there's a bunch of different things that you can use. I like to use the Articles of Confederation for this one. And here is why. Here in this document, we can see where Benjamin Rush is discussing the American War, and he's talking about perfecting our new forms of government. Now that's an important word here, where it says perfecting our new forms of government. Because as we know from the Articles of Confederation, they were kind of a way for the Continental Congress to dial in how the actual structure of our new society would go. And what they found, as you recall, that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and didn't provide enough power to the federal government to do what it needed to do. So in response to that, the Articles were scrapped, and the Constitution that we all know and love was put into effect. So I hope you can see how by citing these two very specific sources, we can link them to the statements that John Adams and Benjamin Rush are making to support their claim that the revolution either began before or began after the actual Revolutionary War. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. You all should have my email in your contacts list by now. Reach out with any questions that you may have about how to specifically answer these questions, and keep an eye out for more of these videos in our series to follow. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys in class next week.